I remember the exact moment I stopped believing my family loved me unconditionally. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no tearful confrontation in the middle of the living room. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting at my desk at work, eating a sad little salad I'd packed from home because I was trying to save money. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a text from my mother. I assumed it was something normal. A recipe she wanted to share. A question about whether I was coming home for the holidays. Maybe even just a random photo of the dog. Instead, it said, "You've become selfish and cold. Your brother never makes us feel this way. We raised you better than this. Don't bother calling until you've fixed your attitude." I stared at the screen for a long time. Long enough that my salad got warm and the dressing soaked through the lettuce and made everything soggy. I remember thinking that was such a stupid thing to notice. Your family just told you you're a disappointment and you're thinking about salad dressing. But that's how shock works, I think. Your brain grabs onto something small and pointless because the real thing is too big to hold all at once. I put my phone face down on my desk. I finished my lunch. I went back to my spreadsheets. And I made a decision, quietly, somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that I would not cry about this at work. I cried about it later. In my car, in the parking garage, with the windows fogged up and Taylor Swift playing softly on the radio because I hadn't touched the dial. I cried until my chest hurt. And then I drove home, washed my face, and started thinking very clearly. Let me back up. Because to understand what happened next, you need to understand what came before. My name is not important. What is important is that I am the older of two children, and for most of my adult life, I have been the one my family called when things went wrong. Not my brother. My brother, Marcus, is 3 years younger than me, charming in the way that people who never had to work very hard for anything tend to be charming. He smiles easily. He tells good stories. He makes our parents laugh in a way that I apparently never quite managed. I was the responsible one. The one who got good grades, and then a scholarship, and then a real job with benefits, and a 401k before I was 26. I was the one who answered the phone at 11 p.m. when my mother couldn't sleep and needed to talk. I was the one who drove 4 hours round trip on a random Wednesday to help my father deal with a plumbing issue because Marcus was busy, and by busy I mean he was at a concert with his friends and had simply not answered his phone. I did not do these things to be a martyr. I did them because they were my family, and I loved them, and I thought that was what love looked like. You show up. You help. You don't keep score. The trouble started about 2 years ago, when Marcus decided he wanted to open a restaurant. Now, Marcus had no experience in the restaurant industry. He had no culinary training. What he had was a dream, a personality, and absolutely no financial history substantial enough to get a small business loan on his own. He had some savings, but not enough. Our parents had some savings, but not enough. The bank wanted a cosigner, someone with a strong credit score, a stable income, and enough assets to back the loan if everything went sideways. They asked me. I want to be honest with you about this part. I had doubts. Serious ones. I lay awake for 2 nights running through the numbers, researching failure rates for new restaurants, thinking about what it would mean for my own finances if this didn't work. I had questions. I asked them. Marcus had answers for all of them, smooth, confident, entirely plausible-sounding answers. Our parents sat at the kitchen table with me and told me that this was Marcus's dream, that he just needed a chance, that family helps family. My mother reached across the table and held my hand and said, "You're the strong one. You've always been the strong one. We're so proud of you." I co-signed the loan. $240,000. That was the number. I did not have $240,000 sitting around, but my credit, my income, my financial profile meant that if Marcus defaulted, the bank would come for me. I understood this. I signed the paperwork anyway. For the first 8 months, things were fine. The restaurant opened. It had a nice name, a good location, a menu that Marcus had put real thought into. People came. Reviews were decent. I went for dinner once a month and always paid full price and tipped 20% and cheered louder than anyone when Marcus came out of the kitchen to talk to the table. I was proud of him. Genuinely. Then things started slipping. He hired too many people too fast. He took on a catering contract he didn't have the staff to fulfill and had to refund a significant deposit. His business partner, a friend from college who had put in some cash early on, quietly pulled out after a disagreement I was never given the full details of. Marcus started missing monthly check-ins with me. Then he stopped returning my calls entirely. I found out from my mother, in a phone call that was supposed to be about something else entirely, that the restaurant had missed 2 loan payments. 2 payments. On the loan I had co-signed. I called Marcus immediately. He picked up, which surprised me. And the conversation that followed was one of the strangest of my life, because he did not sound panicked or ashamed. He sounded mildly annoyed. He told me the cash flow was just temporarily disrupted. He told me he had it handled. He told me that I needed to trust him and stop micromanaging. I was not micromanaging. I had not spoken to him in 6 weeks. I called my parents to tell them what I had found out. And this is where things began to break in a way I don't think ever fully healed. My father told me to be patient. My mother told me Marcus was under a lot of stress and that I wasn't helping by pushing him. When I pointed out that my credit score had already taken a hit and that if the loan went into default it could affect my ability to refinance my own apartment, my mother said quietly but clearly, "It's just a number. Marcus's dream matters more than a number." I sat with that for a moment. Just a number. I had spent 9 years building that number. Carefully, deliberately, making choices other people my age weren't making. Not buying the nicer car, not taking the expensive vacations. Paying down debt aggressively, never carrying a credit card balance. That number was not just a number. That number was my security. My options. My future. But I stayed quiet. I agreed to give it more time. I told myself this was a rough patch, and families get through rough patches. Over the next several months, I quietly started doing things to protect myself. I spoke to a financial advisor. I looked into what my actual exposure was. I started setting aside an emergency fund specifically earmarked for the possibility that I might have to cover payments on a restaurant loan while also paying my own bills. And I called the bank. Not to report anything, not to cause problems. Just to understand my options. What I learned was this. As the co-signer, I had rights too. I had signed documentation. There were processes. I noted all of this and filed it away. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family had developed a texture that I can only describe as careful. Conversations felt like walking across ice. Everyone was pleasant. No one said anything real. I came home for Thanksgiving and sat at the table and passed the sweet potatoes and asked about neighbors I barely remembered and laughed at my father's jokes. And the entire time there was this low hum of something unspoken running beneath every exchange. Marcus gave a toast. He thanked our parents for believing in him. He talked about how the restaurant was turning a corner, how next year was going to be different. He looked directly at me at one point and said, "And thanks to everyone who made it possible." He was smiling. It didn't reach his eyes. I drove home that night, and I thought, something is coming. I didn't know what. I just felt it, the way you sometimes feel weather changing before the sky shows any signs. The text came on a Tuesday in March. I had called my mother the previous weekend to check in. She'd been short with me, distracted, and I'd asked if everything was okay. She said yes. I asked if Marcus was okay. She said fine. I said I was thinking about coming home the following month for my father's birthday. She said that would be nice. We hung up. Normal, or what had come to feel normal. Then, 3 days later, the text arrived, and it was not from my mother alone. It was a group message. Both of my parents. Together, which was unusual. My father almost never sent texts. "We need you to know that your behavior over the past year has been selfish and unsupportive. Marcus is going through the hardest time of his life, and instead of helping your family, you've been pulling away and making everything about yourself. We have spoken about this, and we are in agreement. Until you come to us with a real apology and a willingness to be part of this family, we don't have anything to say to you. Marcus has never made us feel like a burden. You have made us feel like a burden. Figure out who you want to be." I read it 3 times. I thought about calling. I thought about texting back, a long, careful response laying out every factual inaccuracy in what they had said, Every moment over the past 2 years when I had shown up, helped, stayed quiet, protected them. I thought about how satisfying it would feel to press send on that message and how ultimately pointless it would be, because people who have decided a story is true do not want to be given facts that complicate it. So, I didn't call. I didn't text back. I sat in my apartment, in the quiet, and I thought about what I actually wanted to do. And then I thought about that phone call with the bank, and about the financial advisor, and about all the notes I had filed away in a folder on my laptop labeled simply with the loan number. I opened the folder. Let me explain something about co-signing a loan that most people don't think about until it's too late. When you co-sign, you are equally responsible for the debt. But you are also, under the terms of most loan agreements, a party to the contract with specific rights including, in some cases, the right to initiate a review of the loan status, to formally communicate your intent to withdraw ongoing support for future obligations, and, under certain conditions, to negotiate a release from co-signer status if the primary borrower can qualify independently or if the loan is refinanced. I had spent months quietly, carefully understanding exactly what I could and could not do. I had not made any moves. I had been waiting to see if things would stabilize. My family's text message clarified that I had been waiting for something that was not going to happen. I did not make any dramatic phone calls. I did not send a response to the group text. I simply opened my email and wrote to the bank. Clear, factual, professional. I outlined the missed payment history. I stated that I was formally requesting a review of my co-signer status and exploring a release, and that I would be providing a full accounting of my concerns regarding the loan's trajectory. I CC'd the financial advisor I had been working with. Then I sent it. And then I made one more call to a financial attorney I had consulted briefly 6 months earlier and never followed up with. I told her I was ready to move forward. I told her what had happened. She told me what the next steps looked like. I went to sleep that night feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happy exactly. Not relieved. Settled, maybe. Like something that had been slightly off balance had shifted into place. I want to be clear about something. I was not trying to destroy my brother. I was not trying to punish my parents. I was trying to stop drowning in someone else's water while they stood on the shore and told me I wasn't swimming hard enough. 11 days passed. I did not contact my family. They did not contact me. The silence was complete, and honestly, I had expected to find it harder than I did. But when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time, the moment you set it down, the first thing you feel is not grief. The first thing you feel is the absence of weight. On the 12th day, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 20 minutes later. Then my father called. Then Marcus called from a number I didn't recognize, probably because he knew I would see his name and not pick up. Then my mother called again. I did not listen to any of the voicemails that night. I made dinner. I watched something on television that I have no memory of now. I went to bed at 10, which was earlier than usual, and I slept well. In the morning, I listened to the voicemails. My mother's first one was short, and her voice was controlled. She said she needed to speak with me about something important, and could I please call her back? The second one, her voice had changed. She sounded confused and a little frightened. She said that Marcus had received some kind of notice about the loan, and that it didn't make sense, and that she needed to understand what was happening. My father's voicemail was brief. He just said, "Call your mother," which, if you know my father, is either very sweet or very ominous depending on the context. This one was not sweet. Marcus's voicemail, the one from the unknown number, was the longest. He started out measured and ended somewhere else entirely. He said I was being vindictive. He said I was doing this to hurt him on purpose. He said he had always known I was jealous of him, that I'd always resented his success, and that this proved it. He said our parents were devastated. He said I needed to stop whatever I was doing immediately, or he would get a lawyer involved. I put the phone down. I sat with it. Then I called my attorney. I told her about the voicemails. She told me what to say if anyone contacted me directly, and what not to say. She told me the process was moving forward as expected, and that I should let her handle the formal communications. I texted my mother back. Just 2 sentences. I know this is confusing, and I'm sorry for the stress. My attorney is handling the loan situation. and she'll be the right person to talk to about the details. That was all. The calls kept coming for 3 days. From my mother, my father, from my brother, and eventually from my aunt who I had spoken to maybe 4 times in the past 5 years, and who left a voicemail telling me that what I was doing to this family was unforgivable and that I should be ashamed of myself. Which was interesting, given that she had not had any opinion to share when my family sent me a text calling me selfish and telling me I'd made them feel like a burden. On the 4th day, my mother sent a text. It was long. It started with an apology, the first one I had received, but the apology was structured in a way that made it clear it was primarily an apology aimed at getting me to stop the process, not an apology born from any genuine understanding of what had happened. It said she was sorry if I had felt unsupported, and that they hadn't meant to upset me, and that family has to stick together especially in hard times. And then it asked, plainly, if I could please call off whatever was happening with the loan because Marcus was scared and they were all scared and they just needed things to go back to how they were. Back to how they were. I read that line several times. Back to how they were meant back to me co-signing a loan that was bleeding quietly, back to being called selfish for having financial concerns. Back to the group text telling me I'd made them feel like a burden. Back to my mother's voice on the phone, saying my credit score was just a number. I did not want to go back to how they were. I wrote back. And I want to share what I wrote because I chose every word carefully and I am still, months later, at peace with every single one of them. Mom, I love you, and Dad, and I love Marcus too. That has never changed. But love doesn't mean having no limits. I spent 2 years trying to be what this family needed, and 2 weeks ago you both told me, in writing, that I had made you feel like a burden. I've been thinking about that a lot. People who feel like burdens to the people they love tend to make changes. That's what I'm doing. My attorney will be in touch about the loan logistics, and she'll walk everyone through what the path forward looks like. I hope we can find our way back to each other eventually. But I need some time and some space right now. I pressed send. And then I put my phone in my bag and went for a walk, a long one, in a park near my apartment where the trees were just beginning to do the tentative early spring thing, where they look like they can't quite decide if winter is over. I walked for almost 2 hours. I thought about my parents when I was young, the good memories, the ones where I felt genuinely safe and seen. I thought about Marcus as a little kid, annoying and funny and occasionally sweet. I thought about the version of this family I had been trying to hold together long after it had already changed into something harder. I did not feel victorious. I want to make sure that's clear. This is not a story about revenge tasting sweet, about watching someone fall and feeling satisfied. It doesn't feel like that. It feels more like grief, actually. Like mourning the version of your family you spent years believing in, even when the evidence was telling you something different. What I felt, walking through that park, was something closer to clarity. The loan was eventually restructured. It took several months of back and forth. Marcus had to find a new co-signer, a family friend, someone who apparently believed in the restaurant more than I was able to at that point. The process was not smooth or fast or without cost for any of us. My credit took a further hit during the transition. Marcus's restaurant lost a line of credit it had been counting on and had to scale back significantly. My brother did get a lawyer involved, briefly. His lawyer sent a letter. My attorney responded. The letter stopped. My relationship with my parents is in a place I do not have a clean word for. We are in contact. My mother calls occasionally, and we talk about small things: her garden, a book she's reading, how the weather has been. My father is warmer than I expected. He sent me a birthday card this year with a handwritten note inside that said only, "I know things are complicated. I love you, Dad." I have it on my refrigerator. I look at it sometimes. Marcus and I have not spoken since that voicemail where he said I was jealous of his success. I think about what I would say to him if we ever had a real conversation. I don't think I'd say very much, actually. I think I'd mostly want to listen, to hear what his version of the story sounds like, what parts he's left in, and what parts he's quietly edited out. I think we probably have very different movies playing in our heads when we think about the last 2 years. That's not unusual in families. That's almost the rule. What I know is this. For a long time, I believed that if I just gave enough, showed up enough, stayed quiet enough, My family would eventually see me, not as the responsible one, not as the co-signer, not as the one who didn't make them feel like a burden the way Marcus did. Just as me, as someone whose presence in their life was worth something independent of what I could provide. The text message in March taught me that I had been wrong about that, and I had two choices. I could fold back into the old shape, the one that had been slowly crushing me, and hope that someday it would get easier. Or I could let it break entirely and see what I looked like standing up straight. I chose the second one. It is not perfect. It is not painless. Some days I miss my family with an ache that has no bottom. Some days I feel something close to relief, a quiet kind of freedom that I am not sure I could have named before because I had no comparison for it. But here's the thing about setting down something heavy. You cannot go back to not knowing how heavy it was. Once your arms are free, they remember. And whatever comes next, however, my relationship with my parents grows or doesn't, however Marcus and I eventually navigate each other or don't, I am not willing to pick that weight back up again. Not for anyone. Not even for family. Especially not for family. Because the people who love you should not require you to carry their weight until your spine bends. And if they do, it is not love they are asking for. It is something else. Something that has love's name, but not its nature. I learned that slowly, expensively, and later than I should have. But I learned it. And I am standing up straight. If you're watching this and something in this story felt familiar, the phone calls that only come when something's needed, the comparisons, the quiet running tally of what you've given and what you've received. I just want you to know that clarity is not the same as coldness. Protecting yourself is not the same as giving up on people. And knowing your own worth is not, despite what certain family group texts might imply, the same as being selfish. You're allowed to put the weight down. You are allowed to stand up straight.